But joining me now is Sean Tucker. He is the senior editor at Kelley Blue Book. Good morning.
Good morning, Jen.
Now we're going to talk about all things Jeep right now, okay? So let's just dive into this conversation. Jeep just unveiled its first fully electric vehicle. What upside opportunities does Jeep and its parent company, Stellantis, have within the larger EV battle? What are your thoughts?
Jeep is the last of the big three domestically to move into the electric space. And a year ago, most analysts would have told you that's a problem. It's actually proving to be pretty smart because of that sales slowdown you were discussing a little while ago. Sales haven't actually fallen, they're just growing more slowly than they were before. But we're seeing General Motors and Ford throttle back their EV plans a little bit, and Jeep seems to be getting into the market at just the right time.
And what do you think that Jeep and Stellantis need to do to catch up, though, to the EV industry leaders that are currently on the market? As you said, that we're seeing more and more of these kind of cars become more popular, right? We're seeing infrastructure being built throughout the country. Even the Biden administration, I think, has launched an effort a few years ago just to really make sure that states are now implementing this kind of infrastructure to be able to have more EV vehicles on the roads. What's your take?
So, survey after survey, buyers tell us that the three things they need to see change before they'll jump into the EV space are they need prices to come down, range to improve, and the infrastructure build out to speed up. Jeep can help bring prices down. In fact, Antonio Filosa, the new CEO who we just saw, he's only been on the job about 6 months, and that was the first thing he said when he took over. He said Jeeps are overpriced, and we're going to bring the prices down. So there's an opportunity there. This Wagoneer S is coming in at $72,000, and I don't think they're going to sell a whole lot of $72,000 EVs. But when you build the expensive one first, it pays for the opportunity to build the less expensive ones later. We expect them to come out with at least one more in the next year that's going to be a little more affordable. Range, this one already having 300 miles is about at the point that most people want to see before they're ready to buy. And infrastructure is not something the automakers themselves can solve, but Jeep has said that they plan to try to build some infrastructure at trailheads, and I think that will go a long way with the sort of person who's looking to buy a Jeep to convince them that it's safe to make the switch.
Yeah, you know, we're seeing there's three big rivals out there, right, as you mentioned, but specifically when it comes to Jeep and Stellantis, how do you think that this company can really win the battle in the EV space?
They have a very different challenge than General Motors and Ford do because they have a series of brands that have taken sort of very public positions with an ethos that's not very EV friendly. You think of Dodge, you think of the big V8 power in the muscle cars. You think of Jeep and you think of off-roaders, you think of Ram and you think of that heavy towing power. Those, the buyers who are looking for that are the ones who are going to have to be convinced.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there, but you know, I do want to jump into what you mentioned as far as what consumers are looking for, right? So as the editor of Kelley Blue Book, what do you think the biggest trends right now are when it comes to making a purchase of an EV model?
We're seeing prices come down. The average electric vehicle is about 15% less expensive than it was a year ago, and that's probably the biggest change that we've seen that's starting to drive these purchases. But there is a natural adoption curve with any new technology where the early adopters are excited to buy and they jump in right away. And then sales slow down a little bit as a new group of buyers has to be convinced. And we're in that valley right now. So the sales slowdown you're seeing, it's important to note sales are not shrinking. They're still growing. They're just growing more slowly than they had been a year ago. And I think that's because a more skeptical group now needs to be talked into buying these.
Now, there's a lot of discussions, obviously, at the forefront when it comes to the EV space. We talked about infrastructure a little bit. We also talked about, what consumers are looking for. We're talking about sales. But what would you say are the priorities? Are we seeing priorities change when it comes to, this sort of rivalry within the EV space?
What you're seeing right now is that the companies that jumped in hardest are throttling back a little bit. General Motors has delayed a couple of EVs and said they're going to bring in more hybrids and plug-in hybrids to fill in that space. Ford is slowing down production of a couple of them and bringing in more hybrids. That is not, though, a sign that the EV transition is not going to happen. It's just a sign that it's happening on a slightly slower pace than they expected, which plays into Jeep's favor, actually, because that's the pace Jeep is naturally on.
Now, I want to talk about, obviously, it's a big year. It's an election year. How do you think the outcome of this election will impact the overall EV sector?
Probably not as much as the politicians will try to convince you it will. They're trying to turn it into an election issue, but the reality is that automakers don't make long-term planning decisions on a 2 to 3 year horizon to where they're looking at the next election and saying that needs to control our decisions. Building a new factory is $1 billion decision, and so you do it with a 20-year horizon. And I had a conversation with White House climate advisor Ali Zaidi about this not long ago, and he made the point that the steel is in the ground, the factories are being built. That's not going to reverse itself based on the results in the next election.
A lot to look out for. Thank you so much, Sean. A lot of key takeaways.
Thanks, Trinity.